The navigation console chose the worst possible moment to have what could generously be called a complete nervous breakdown. Lieutenant Jake Morrison watched in fascination as his ship's supposedly state-of-the-art guidance system began displaying readings that suggested he was simultaneously approaching 3 different star systems, none of which appeared on any known star charts, while also somehow being inside a black hole and approximately -7 light-years from Earth. "Well," he said to the empty cockpit, "that's not supposed to happen." The Stardancer had been humanity's pride and joy exactly 48 hours ago. A sleek reconnaissance vessel, equipped with the latest quantum drive technology, and an AI system that was supposed to be smarter than a philosophy professor with a caffeine addiction. Now it was drifting through space like a very expensive paperweight, its sensors insisting that the planet below was both uninhabited and teeming with a civilization that had apparently mastered the art of existing in multiple dimensions at once. Jake pressed a few buttons experimentally. The console responded by playing what sounded like alien elevator music and displaying a holographic recipe for something called quantum soup. He was beginning to suspect that the navigation malfunction might be more serious than initially advertised. "Okay, computer," he said, addressing the ship's AI with the kind of patience usually reserved for explaining internet passwords to elderly relatives. "Let's try this again. Where exactly are we?" "Location, everywhere and nowhere," the AI responded in its maddeningly cheerful voice. "Also, you have 17 missed calls from command, and your mother wants to know why you never write." Jake stared at the console. Did you just give me relationship advice during a potential first contact situation? Would you prefer I focus on the fact that we're about to be boarded by what appear to be highly advanced alien beings, with excellent fashion sense and questionable intentions regarding your personal freedom? Before Jake could formulate a response that adequately expressed his confusion, the ship shuddered gently, as if something very large and very confident had just decided to give it a hug. The hull resonated with a low, musical hum that seemed to bypass his ears entirely and speak directly to his bones. "Tractor beam," he muttered, watching through the viewport as elegant silver shapes moved through space with the fluid grace of dolphins swimming through liquid starlight. "Of course it's a tractor beam, because apparently my day wasn't interesting enough already." The alien vessels, if that's what they were, looked like someone had taken the concept of aerodynamics and decided to improve it through the application of pure artistry. They flowed rather than flew, their hulls shifting and rippling with patterns of light that suggested technology, so advanced it had transcended the need to look technological. Jake activated the Universal Translator, a device that had been tested on exactly 17 alien languages and had achieved a success rate of roughly 60%, assuming you didn't mind occasional mistranslations that turned diplomatic greetings into declarations of culinary warfare. "Attention, unidentified vessel," came a voice that somehow managed to sound both authoritative and musical, like a symphony conductor who had decided to moonlight as a traffic cop. "You have violated the territorial boundaries of the Velthara Empire. Prepare to be escorted to the surface for processing." "Processing?" Jake asked the empty air. "That doesn't sound ominous at all." He keyed the communications array. "This is Lieutenant Jake Morrison of the Earth Colonial Defense Force. I seem to be having some technical difficulties with my navigation system. Any chance we could discuss this over coffee? I make excellent coffee." "Well, actually, the ship makes excellent coffee. I mostly just press buttons and hope for the best." The silence that followed stretched long enough for Jake to wonder if the translator had decided to render his words as an elaborate recipe for human stew. Finally, the voice returned, and there was something different in its tone, a hint of what might have been amusement. "You wish to negotiate with coffee. I find most problems can be solved with caffeine and reasonable conversation," Jake replied. "Though I'm flexible on the caffeine part if you have something stronger. It's been that kind of day." Another pause, shorter this time. You will be brought to the surface. Do not attempt to resist or activate any weapon systems. I wouldn't dream of it, Jake said, settling back in his pilot's seat as the alien ships began to guide his vessel toward the planet below. Though for the record, my weapon systems are about as functional as my navigation right now, so resistance wasn't really an option anyway. The planet grew larger in his viewport, revealing itself to be a world that seemed to exist in defiance of several basic principles of physics. Continents drifted across its surface like slow-moving clouds, occasionally intersecting with each other in ways that should have resulted in catastrophic geological events, but instead created patterns of breathtaking beauty. Cities of crystal and light stretched between floating islands, connected by bridges that appeared to be constructed from solidified starlight. Note to self, Jake murmured. Next time I volunteer for a routine scouting mission, read the fine print about potential interdimensional complications. The Stardancer touched down in what appeared to be a landing bay the size of a small city, its walls decorated with murals that seemed to tell the story of a civilization's journey from planet-bound existence to mastery over the fundamental forces of the universe. Jake gathered his emergency kit, checked his sidearm out of habit despite its obvious uselessness, and prepared to become humanity's most accidental ambassador. The airlock cycled with a soft chime, and Jake stepped onto the surface of an alien world for the first time in his life. The air tasted of ozone and something that reminded him of his grandmother's garden after a spring rain. Gravity felt normal, temperature was comfortable, and the welcoming committee appeared to consist of beings who looked remarkably human except for their ears, which were elegantly pointed and approximately twice as long as anything evolution had seen fit to provide Earth's population. "Lieutenant Morrison," said the apparent leader, a tall woman whose bearing suggested both authority and the kind of patience that came from dealing with problematic visitors on a regular basis. "I am Commander Sira of the Velthara Guard. You will come with us." Jake looked around at the assembled escort, a dozen figures in flowing garments that seemed to be cut from liquid metal and starlight. They were beautiful in a way that made him suddenly conscious of his rumpled uniform and the fact that he hadn't shaved in 2 days. "Well," he said, raising his hands in what he hoped was a universal gesture of peaceful surrender, "this is either going really well or really badly. Should I bow or just ask for the Wi-Fi password?" Commander Sira's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, and Jake could have sworn he saw the corner of her mouth twitch upward for just an instant. "You will follow me to the palace. The Queen wishes to speak with you." "The Queen!" Jake fell into step beside her, marveling at the way the corridor seemed to reshape itself around their passage, walls flowing like water to accommodate their movement. "I don't suppose she's in the mood for coffee and reasonable conversation." "That," said Commander Sira, "remains to be seen." The palace throne room defied every architectural principle Jake had ever encountered, starting with the fact that it appeared to exist in roughly 4 dimensions simultaneously. The ceiling stretched upward into what might have been infinity or possibly just very convincing special effects, while the floor beneath his feet felt solid despite being completely transparent and offering a dizzying view of the planet's core, where molten rocks swirled in patterns that spelled out what looked like poetry in languages he couldn't read. "Try not to look down too long," Commander Sira advised quietly. "First-time visitors sometimes experience temporal displacement." "Temporal what now?" Jake asked, but before she could answer, a voice resonated through the chamber with the kind of authority that made gravity seem negotiable. "Lieutenant Jake Morrison of Earth." The Queen of the Velthara Empire sat upon a throne that appeared to be carved from a single piece of crystallized time, its faceted surface reflecting not just light but moments, past conversations, future possibilities, and what Jake was increasingly certain were scenes from several different timelines where he had handled this situation with significantly more dignity. Queen Lyrale was, quite simply, the most beautiful being Jake had ever encountered. And this was coming from someone who had once dated a supermodel who turned out to be an undercover intelligence operative with a PhD in theoretical physics. The Queen's features were classically human, save for the gracefully pointed ears that marked her as unmistakably Vilthara. Her eyes held the depth of someone who had lived through the rise and fall of civilizations, yet there was something almost playful in her expression as she studied him. "Your Majesty," Jake said, attempting what he hoped was an appropriate bow. "I come in peace, bearing greetings from Earth, and I promise I didn't mean to crash your interdimensional party." Several members of the court made sounds that the universal translator helpfully rendered as shocked gasping and mild apoplexy, but the Queen's lips curved upward in what was unmistakably amusement. "You speak with unusual directness for a diplomat," she said, her voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate in his chest. "Well, technically I'm not a diplomat," Jake admitted. "I'm more of a scout who got really lost. Though in my defense, your planet seems to exist in several different places at once, which makes navigation surprisingly challenging. Indeed, Veridia Prime exists at the intersection of multiple dimensional streams. We find it provides excellent protection against unwanted visitors." Her gaze sharpened with interest. "Yet your vessel passed through our barriers without triggering any of our defense systems. Most curious." Jake glanced at Commander Sierra, who nodded encouragingly. "My ship's AI has been having what you might call an existential crisis. It thinks we're simultaneously everywhere and nowhere, and it started giving me dating advice. I'm beginning to suspect your dimensional streams might have caused some kind of quantum entanglement with our navigation computer." The Queen leaned forward slightly. "Your artificial intelligence is experiencing dimensional consciousness overflow." "Fascinating. In most species, such exposure results in complete system failure or, in rare cases, transcendent awareness. Your technology appears to have achieved something in between." "So my computer has basically achieved enlightenment, but decided to use it to critique my personal life." "Essentially, yes." Jake nodded solemnly. "That actually explains a lot about my week." The Queen gestured, and the air shimmered, forming chairs that looked like they had been grown rather than built. "Please, sit. We have much to discuss regarding the situation between our peoples." Jake settled into what turned out to be the most comfortable chair in the known universe, one that seemed to adjust itself perfectly to his body, while somehow managing to massage muscles he hadn't realized were tense. "Situation. I thought we were still in the pretending each other doesn't exist phase of interspecies relations. That phase ended 6 months ago when your Kepler station began broadcasting into our space," the Queen said, her tone growing more serious. "The signals disrupted several of our deep meditation colonies and caused 3 diplomatic marriages to be postponed indefinitely." "Wait," Jake said, sitting up straighter. "Kepler station caused relationship problems. How does that even work?" Queen Lyreley waved her hand, and holographic images filled the air between them. Star charts, signal patterns, and what appeared to be very disappointed-looking alien couples. "Your station's quantum communications array resonated at the exact frequency of our mating songs. For 6 months, every time your scientists transmitted data, our people heard what roughly translates to, 'Will you marry me?' Never mind, I take it back," repeated at regular intervals. Jake stared at the holographs. "Oh no, oh that's actually terrible, I'm so sorry, no wonder you're not thrilled to see us." The situation became more complex when the broadcast suddenly stopped. Many of our people interpreted this as a mass rejection by humanity, leading to what your psychologists might call a species-wide bout of depression. "So let me get this straight," Jake said, rubbing his temples. "Humanity accidentally proposed to your entire civilization, then ghosted you for 6 months, and now I've crash-landed in your living room like the worst rebound date in galactic history." The Queen's laugh was like music played on instruments made of starlight. That is perhaps the most accurate diplomatic summary I have ever heard. Well, at least I'm good at something, Jake muttered. So where do we go from here? Is there some kind of interspecies relationship counseling we can try? Actually, the Queen said, rising from her throne, there might be. Our customs dictate that accidental marriage proposals must be addressed through the ritual of understanding, a series of shared experiences designed to determine compatibility between potential partners. Jake felt his eyebrows attempt to climb off his forehead entirely. I'm sorry, what now? Oh, not individual partnerships, the Queen clarified quickly, though something in her expression suggested she found his reaction amusing. The ritual would be performed between representatives of our species, a symbolic exploration of whether our civilizations are compatible for alliance. And let me guess, I'm humanity's representative because I'm the only human currently available. Unless you have others hidden in your vessel. Jake looked around the throne room, taking in the assembled court of impossibly elegant beings, the reality-defying architecture, and the Queen whose every word seemed to carry the weight of cosmic significance. You know what? Sure, why not? I've already accidentally proposed to your entire species, caused a diplomatic crisis, and crash-landed on a planet that exists in multiple dimensions. Might as well add, emergency marriage counselor for 2 entire civilizations, to my resume. The Queen smiled, and Jake felt something in his chest do a complicated maneuver that had nothing to do with the throne room's gravitational anomalies. Excellent, she said. We shall begin tomorrow with the first trial, the sharing of sustenance. I trust you will find our cuisine educational, as long as it doesn't involve anything that's still moving or requires me to solve mathematical equations. To unlock the flavor, I'm game. Oh, the Queen said, her smile widening. You might want to brush up on your quantum calculus. Jake looked at Commander Sierra, who shrugged apologetically. Welcome to Veridia Prime, Lieutenant Morrison. Try not to cause any more interdimensional incidents before breakfast. Jake discovered that Velthara breakfast came with a user manual. The glowing spheres respond to emotional resonance, Queen Lyrale explained patiently as Jake stared at his plate, which appeared to be having an identity crisis. Think peaceful thoughts and they'll taste like your most comforting childhood memory. Anxiety produces flavors that are less pleasant. What happens if I think about taxes? The spheres have been known to spontaneously combust. Jake poked one of the orbs with his fork, watching as it pulsed with soft blue light. And the mathematical equations. Each sphere contains a quantum flavor matrix. To unlock the full taste profile, you must solve for the optimal harmonic frequency. The Queen demonstrated by humming a complex melody while touching her sphere, which promptly transformed into what looked like a miniature galaxy complete with tiny rotating planets. Right, Jake said slowly. So breakfast is basically a pop quiz in advanced physics with a side of mind reading. More or less. Jake tried humming what he remembered of an old Earth song. His sphere turned bright purple and began playing what sounded like a disappointed tuba. I don't suppose you have anything like cereal, preferably the kind that doesn't require a PhD to consume. The Queen gestured, and a servant approached with a bowl of something that looked reassuringly normal. Quantum oats, she explained. They exist in a superposition of cooked and uncooked until observed. Of course they do. Jake took a cautious spoonful. The oats were simultaneously crunchy and smooth, hot and cold, sweet and savory. You know what? This is actually pretty good. It's like Schrödinger's breakfast. I'm not familiar with that reference. Earth physicist had a theory about cats that may or may not exist depending on whether you're looking at them. Queen Lyrale tilted her head, her long ears shifting slightly with curiosity. Your species developed quantum theory by thinking about cats. We're weird like that. We also invented the internet primarily to The Queen's expression grew slightly more formal. Of course. Lieutenant Morrison, would you care to observe? I believe it would be educational for both our species." Jake followed them through corridors that seemed to reshape themselves with each step, walls flowing like water to accommodate their passage. The council chamber turned out to be a spherical room where the assembled Velthara nobles sat on platforms that floated at various levels, creating a three-dimensional parliament that looked like something from a fever dream. "Your Majesty," began one of the counselors, an elderly male whose ears were decorated with what appeared to be living jewelry that crawled slowly across the pointed surfaces. "The human presence creates complications. The Kepler incident damaged our diplomatic relationships with 3 neighboring systems. Now we harbor one of their representatives." "The human crashed," the Queen replied calmly. "We did not invite him." Nevertheless, his presence suggests accommodation with a species that has proven disruptive to galactic harmony. Jake cleared his throat. "If I may, I know I'm new to this whole interdimensional politics thing, but from where I'm standing, the Kepler incident was a genuine accident. We didn't even know you existed until about 18 hours ago." Several counselors made sounds that the translator rendered as indignant chittering and diplomatic huffing. "The human speaks without permission," declared another counselor, this one a woman whose ears seemed to be made of crystallized music. "This demonstrates the chaotic nature of their species." "Actually," Jake said cheerfully, "this demonstrates that I have no idea what your protocols are, and I'm making it up as I go along. Which, now that I think about it, is pretty much how humanity handles everything. We're very consistent that way." Queen Lyrale raised a hand for silence. "The human's directness is refreshing. Perhaps it's time we addressed our concerns openly rather than through formal rhetoric." "Very well," said the elderly counselor. "Human, your species broadcasts romantic proposals into our space, disrupts our meditation colonies, and arrives unannounced on our homeworld. What assurance can you provide that humanity will not continue to cause chaos?" Jake thought about this seriously. "Honestly, none whatsoever. We're definitely going to cause more chaos. It's kind of our thing. But here's the difference. We'll cause chaos accidentally while trying to do the right thing, not on purpose while trying to hurt people. And when we mess up, we try to fix it." "That is hardly reassuring," muttered the woman with crystal ears. "Maybe not, but it's honest. Look, I can't speak for all of humanity, but I can tell you that most of us are just trying to figure things out as we go. We make mistakes, we learn from them, and we try to do better next time. Sometimes we succeed, sometimes we accidentally propose to entire alien civilizations." The Queen leaned forward in her floating chair. "And what would you propose as a solution to our current situation?" Jake looked around the chamber at the assembled nobility, then back at the Queen. Something in her expression, a flicker of amusement perhaps, or maybe just curiosity, gave him courage. "Well," he said, "I'm thinking we could start small. Maybe some kind of cultural exchange program. You could teach us how to not accidentally broadcast marriage proposals into space, and we could show you some of our less destructive technologies. Like coffee, everyone loves coffee." "Coffee?" repeated the elderly counselor skeptically. "Trust me on this one. Also, maybe we could establish some kind of communication protocol so if we mess up again, and we will, we can at least apologize properly instead of just going radio silent for 6 months." The chamber fell quiet except for the soft humming of the floating platforms. Jake could feel the weight of their consideration, and he suddenly became very aware that he was potentially negotiating the future of human-alien relations while wearing a wrinkled uniform and having breakfast residue on his shirt. Finally, Queen Lyrale spoke. "The humans' proposals have merit. Perhaps we could arrange a trial period of limited contact." "Your Majesty," the elderly counselor said carefully, "are you certain this is wise? The human's casual manner suggests a lack of proper respect for the gravity of interspecies relations." Jake caught the Queen's eye and saw something there that looked almost like a challenge. "Your Majesty," he said solemnly, I assure you I have nothing but respect for the gravity of the situation. In fact, I respect it so much that I'm trying really hard not to think about how we're having this conversation in a room where gravity appears to be optional. The Queen's laugh filled the chamber like silver bells, and Jake felt that strange flutter in his chest again. I believe, she said, that Lieutenant Morrison's approach may be exactly what our species need to understand each other. 3 weeks into what was supposed to be a simple cultural exchange, Jake had learned several important things about Velthara society. Their tea ceremonies could alter the flow of time. Their libraries contained books that wrote themselves based on the reader's subconscious desires. And Queen Lyreley had a laugh that could make him forget he was 47 light years from home. "You're doing it again," she said, looking up from the holographic star charts they'd been studying in her private study. The room existed in a state of perpetual twilight, illuminated by constellations that drifted lazily across the ceiling like luminous fish. "Doing what?" Jake asked, though he had a pretty good idea what she meant. "Staring at me with that expression humans make when they're thinking too hard about something they don't want to admit they're thinking about." Jake felt heat rise in his cheeks. "I was thinking about the trade agreement protocols, very serious diplomatic thoughts." "Of course you were." The Queen's ears twitched with amusement, a gesture Jake had learned to recognize as the Velthara equivalent of rolling one's eyes. "And I suppose you were also having serious diplomatic thoughts yesterday, when you spent 10 minutes watching me explain quantum botany. Your plants grow in 17 dimensions simultaneously. That's scientifically fascinating." "My plants grow in 3 dimensions, like everyone else's." The 17-dimensional part was a joke. Jake paused in the middle of reaching for his coffee cup. "Wait, what?" "I've been testing your gullibility for educational purposes. So far, you've believed that our fruit requires calculus to eat, that our weather is controlled by committee vote, and that we reproduce through interpretive dance." "The interpretive dance thing seemed plausible," Jake protested. "You people are very graceful." Queen Lyreley rose from her chair and moved to stand beside the window, where the city's living spires swayed in patterns that followed music only they could hear. "Jake," she said, and something in her voice made him forget all about quantum botany and interdimensional fruit. "We need to discuss what happens when your rescue ship arrives." The words hit him like cold water. Somehow, in the comfortable routine of morning negotiations, afternoon cultural exchanges, and evening conversations that stretched long into the night, he'd managed to forget that his presence here was temporary. That Earth's diplomatic corps was probably already assembling a proper first contact team, complete with actual ambassadors who knew how to conduct interspecies relations without accidentally causing marriage crises. "Right," he said, setting down his cup carefully. "The professionals." "Commander Sierra received a transmission this morning. A Colonial Defense Force vessel will arrive within the week." Jake nodded, staring at his hands. "That's good. That's what should happen. I mean, I was never supposed to be your diplomatic contact anyway. I'm just the guy who got lost and crashed your interdimensional party." "Is that all you think you are?" The question caught him off guard. He looked up to find the Queen watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "Well, yeah. I'm not a diplomat, I'm not a scientist, I'm not even particularly good at being a scout, apparently. I'm just a guy who's really good at being in the wrong place at the wrong time." "You're the human who made my people laugh for the first time in decades," she said quietly. "You're the one who turned a potential diplomatic crisis into an opportunity for understanding. You're the one who looked at our most sacred council chamber and worried about optional gravity." Jake felt that flutter in his chest again, stronger this time. "Lyreley. You're also," she continued, moving closer, "the one who's been looking at me like I'm more than just a political necessity." The air between them seemed to thicken with possibility. Jake could smell the faint scent of ozone and starlight that always surrounded her, could see the way the constellation light caught in her eyes. "That might be a problem," he said softly. "Why?" Because you're looking at me the same way. The silence stretched between them, filled with 3 weeks of shared laughter, late-night conversations, and the growing awareness that what had started as diplomatic necessity had become something much more dangerous. "Careful there, Your Majesty," Jake said, trying to inject some levity into the moment before it became too intense to handle. "Keep looking at me like that, and people might think you're falling in love with me." He expected her to laugh, or maybe make one of her gentle jokes about human presumption. Instead, she met his eyes with a steady gaze that seemed to see straight through to his soul. "Too late," she said simply. The words hit him like a physical force. Jake felt his world shift on its axis, reality reorganizing itself around two simple words that changed everything. "Lyrale, I know," she said, reaching up to touch his face with fingers that trembled slightly. "I know all the reasons why this is impossible. I know you have to leave. I know there will be protocols and procedures and 1,000 political considerations. But I also know that somewhere between your first terrible joke and your last terrible joke, I stopped thinking of you as the lost human and started thinking of you as Jake." He caught her hand in his, marveling at how perfectly it fit. "For what it's worth, I stopped thinking of you as the scary alien queen about 5 minutes after I met you, possibly sooner." "When did you know?" Jake considered this. "Honestly, when you laughed at my Wi-Fi password joke. Anyone who can find humor in a diplomatic crisis while sitting on a throne made of crystallized time is someone I want to know better." She smiled, and Jake felt his heart do something acrobatic. "What do we do now?" "I have no idea," he admitted. "This is definitely not covered in any manual I've ever read, but I'm thinking we could start with this." He leaned down and kissed her, and the universe exploded into starlight and possibility. She tasted like quantum tea and cosmic mystery, and when she kissed him back, Jake was pretty sure he felt the room's gravity shift in celebration. When they broke apart, both breathless, the Queen rested her forehead against his. "The Council will have opinions about this development." "Let them," Jake said. "I've been accidentally causing diplomatic incidents since I got here. Might as well make this one count." A soft chime announced Commander Sierra's arrival, and they sprang apart like guilty teenagers. "Your Majesty," Sierra said, studiously not noticing their flushed faces and disheveled appearance, "the Earth vessel has arrived ahead of schedule. They're requesting permission to land." Jake and Lyrale exchanged glances. "Send them my regards," Jake said, "and tell them their scout got a little distracted by the local culture." 6 months later, Jake stood in the same landing bay where he'd first set foot on Veridia Prime, watching as another Earth ship settled onto the crystalline platform. This time, he wasn't alone. Queen Lyrale stood beside him, wearing robes that seemed to be woven from liquid starlight and a smile that could have powered a small star system. "Nervous?" she asked, slipping her hand into his. "Terrified," Jake admitted. "I'm about to introduce my mother to my alien queen fiancé. There's no protocol for this in any manual ever written. Your mother will love me. My mother will interrogate you about your intentions, ask when you're planning to give her grandchildren, and probably try to feed you enough food to sustain a small army. I look forward to it." The ship's hatch opened, and Jake's replacement stepped out. A proper diplomat with proper credentials and probably a proper manual on interspecies relations that didn't involve accidentally proposing to entire civilizations. Behind him came Jake's family, friends, and what appeared to be half the Colonial Defense Force's command structure. "Lieutenant Morrison," the diplomat began formally, "I'm Ambassador Chen. We're here to relieve you of your diplomatic duties and begin formal negotiations with the Velthara Empire." "Actually," Jake said, grinning as his mother spotted him and started pushing through the crowd with the determination of a woman who had waited 6 months to properly scold her son for getting lost in space, "I think I'll be staying on as a cultural liaison. Turns out I'm pretty good at this diplomacy thing, as long as nobody expects me to be diplomatic about it." Queen Lyreley squeezed his hand. "Besides," she added, "we're still working through the ritual of understanding. It's a very thorough process." "How thorough?" Ambassador Chen asked suspiciously. Jake and Lyreley exchanged glances and smiled. "Well," Jake said, "we figure we'll need about the next 50 years to really understand each other properly."